I had a hell of a morning. I broke my toilet this morning as well. The
Oh,
handle
no.
just snapped. So the morning has been a write-off at this point.
Some days are just like that, aren't they? Murky. I don't know where you are, but I'm southeast London, so
Right. Yeah.
and it's not a great day.
I was going to say I'm in Lincolnshire, and at the minute we have very thick fog.
Yeah, that's what we've had actually. Yeah. But in London, it's hard to know if it's pollution or fog or
it's one of the other things.
Yeah, exactly.
But with all that said, I'll welcome you to the podcast, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Graham.
It's very nice to have you here, and, despite our troubles of the hopefully,
sure.
You're well. Otherwise, apart from
yeah, I do have a bit of a dodgy voice, I'm afraid, because I got COVID over Christmas, and I haven't really fully got my voice back. Right. I missed all my Christmas parties like everyone else, and then we had on Thursday night. I had a catch up with some people. Like I've got some comics pals that we do kind of dinners with and stuff. And we were very enthusiastic about meeting up, and I'm still getting over that. A very wonderful night, and I think I'm probably on day 2 of the hangovers. That shows you how enthusiastic we were.
I think that's been common though. I think I spoke to a few friends who, towards Christmas, they were so worried about going into lockdown, they were partying harder pre-lockdown.
Yeah. See, I did the opposite. Like my daughter got COVID, so I just isolated with her, right. And then after a week, inevitably I got it, so it was just everything was cancelled, and I got the all clear on Christmas Eve morning. Right. I had to call my mum, and she's like, "I'm in the car, I'm coming." Like, okay, mum. And it was, everyone had such an intense time, right? It was just rubbish, and anyone with kids got COVID. Just flew through the schools. So, but luckily, we're all fine from it. But I still feel like I've been smoking 40 fags a day for like the whole of December. So hopefully that will pass.
Yes. We'll hope that will move on.
Yeah. I should say cigarettes. I still say the wrong word. Cigarettes a day.
Cigarettes a day. Of course. It's hard to get out of that one, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, I gave up smoking 15 years ago. Okay. So I probably still have, quite old vernacular about it.
Do you do that thing, which I still do, where I give up smoking, but every time I drink, my brain goes, "Oh, it's time to smoke."
Yes. Yeah. And nothing worse than me walking past someone, because I smoked roll-ups. If I walk past someone with a roll-up, it's just like, I'm just going to stand next to you and breathe in for a bit. I have a horribly addictive personality, so it's like all or nothing, so I just like breathe a bit deeper next to that person, and then just try and move on. But and
then resist when they offer you one, inevitably.
It's always the bad bit.
That's how I limit it. Is I go out with my friends who do smoke, and I don't buy cigarettes. I wait for them to offer me one, and then I'll have that cigarette, and I don't.
You're
have it
that person.
And then I'll have a cigarette, and then if they don't offer me another one, that's fine.
Oh, you sound like my sister. She used to do that to me. I don't smoke, but I smoke all of Lucy's roll-ups when I'm drunk.
It's because I know if I buy a pack, I'm going to smoke 20 in a night. Because they don't let you buy 10s anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. See, that's how long ago I gave up.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you can only get packs of 20. So if you buy 20, you're going to have 20, or you're going to have some left over the next morning.
Yeah, and then you're going to start again.
Finish this
yeah, I bought it now.
It's like £6 a pack. That's full waste.
Is it? Wow, I'm glad I gave up when I did. I can afford to smoke now.
That was one of the main reasons I stopped. It's just
blimey, that is expensive. That's a bottle of Chianti. I'd much rather have that.
It lasts slightly about the same time frame.
Probably about the same in this house, but yeah.
I'm terrible at introducing guests, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Lucy. Who are you and what are you?
I'm Lucy Sullivan. I write and draw comics. I guess that's probably the only way to describe myself. I teach a bit as well. I teach on illustration at sort of higher education level. That's probably me. And I don't smoke anymore.
As we've established, definitely don't smoke.
Definitely.
So I discovered you, I think, through Hackney Zine.
Yes, we were both doing it, weren't we?
Yeah, that was the first time I'd kind of even really been involved with it at all.
I got to do the first one in Hackney, and it was just the loveliest day. So hopefully, if there's a point where they get back to being in person, you must come, because it's definitely one of the friendliest and really busy. There was a lot of people. It was in a brewery, so that helped.
I mean, yeah, that
And Joe's really great. Joe Stone, who runs it, is really great at finding connections, and he's a clever boy, definitely.
Good way to do it. I mean, obviously you're heavily comic book based.
Yes.
Have you attended kind of zine fairs and stuff like that as well, or is it more Comic Con?
No, I prefer zine fairs actually. Like the smaller the better. I do cons. I do the lakes up in Kendal every year, and I've done Thought Bubble for the last 3 years, although one was obviously online. But I love zine fairs, and I really miss. We had this amazing one in London, run by Stan and Henry Miller, called Catford Comic Art Fair, and it's in a pub in Catford, which is still quite a moody part of London, and I love it for that. And it's this old Irish pub, and we just fill up the room above the pub and an outside marquee. And we are literally like last time, I was next to Alicia and someone else, and we were like shoulder to shoulder like this, and you literally get half a pub table to put your stuff on, and it's just joyous. And Stan and Henry, they're like son and dad, and they do comics and zines and stuff as well under Millertown. They make soup or stew or something, and so like halfway through they hand everyone soup and stew. And like if you're in the marquee, where it's basically like last time it's chucking down with rain, and it's December, so it's the end of the year, so it's like the comics like small press Christmas party essentially. If you're in the marquee, you're freezing, and that stew is like totally a godsend. If you're in the room upstairs, which is where I always end up, the condensation on the windows alone, it's just, it's like the air is damp with it. It's just a hot stew. It's like, I'd really like a gazpacho or something. Like, I don't want something cold, but it is just wonderful. And then, everyone finishes at 5 and we all head down to the bar with all the old Irish boys, and, much drinking of Guinness and beer is done, and hanging out and chatting. And it's just wonderful. And I miss Catford so much. It was the one that I was like, there's the small press ones where I think there's no airs and graces. Although, to be fair to the lakes and Thought Bubble, it doesn't feel like that particularly there either. But there's definitely like, you get put into sections of, are you small press? Are you zines? Are you this? Are you a pro? Whereas, Catford, you could have people of all different aspects of it, but they're still feeling like they're small press, even when you're like, you're quite a big deal, but you're happy to like set up a table. And so it's great.
I think I've had that a couple of times of kind of rocking up to zine fairs and kind of looking around and thinking, I know some of these people. Why do I know them? And I kind of look up on Instagram and I'm like, oh, look, they're huge. But I think if you can't, because I started with the zine fairs really, and going to things like Ladies Do Comics, which is kind of like a meetup. And there was a South London zine fair that I helped out on, which is back next year. This year. God, it's this year now. It's back this year. And I think I got so used to that vibe of it. And then the lakes is quite small, even though there's quite, like this year just gone. I was so confused with the years. 2021, I'll just use the number. They had like Dave McKean there, and people like that. I mean, I'm a total fan of Dave McKean, so it was a bit like, oh my God, I can't believe he's here. But you could just go up and go, hello, you're Dave McKean. And it's, I think that beauty of comics though, even on the bigger scale, is that they are a leveler. At the end of the day, I think you can only really do it because you love it, because even the people at the top, they're not making oodles of cash, like they're still, especially the artists, they're still working really hard to incredibly short deadlines, and they just want to have a chat and a beer as well. So I think they're wonderful things. Definitely, I definitely think when you've made a comic, you kind of, there is a level of, doesn't matter how big you get, someone looks over you like,
Yeah,
that was work, wasn't it?
yeah. Even a zine, you know, they take a lot of effort, and a lot of you putting yourself into it, and you want to see it burst and in the world and have someone pick it up. And I mean, there's always that inevitable horrible thing where people like, I have this with my graphic novel where people pick it up and flick through it and then put it down and sort of smile and walk off, and it's like 10 years of my life went into that book. It's about a personal breakdown, and you're just there like, feel free to stop on that page. That was the bad bit. Yeah. Drink that in and then walk off you go. Right.
And they flick to that one illustration which in your head you're like, it's not quite how I wanted it to be, and that's the one they're looking
it's the worst. Well, in that book, for some reason it unfolds at the spread that I hate the most, because it is like represents one of the worst things that happened to me, and it just unfolds at it, and you're just there, and the people are looking at you like, is this what it and you're like, please, yes, it's quite a heavy book, just to be fair, you know. But it's all part of it though, isn't it?
It's interesting that you mentioned Dave McKean there, because when I saw your work, the first thing I thought was like, this is very Dave McKean.
Oh, blimey, thank you. I adore Dave McKean. He's one of the earlier comics I got was Signal to Noise, which he drew with Neil Gaiman, and I just poured over it, you know. And I don't think I could ever achieve his kind of beauty of line. I've got Raptor at the moment. I haven't started reading it, and I'm almost putting it off because I know that I'm going to be like mortally terrified of how brilliant he is, and I want to be like that. He's so good. But I appreciate that. It's a huge compliment. I don't see it myself, but I'm definitely influenced. So, you know, that's fair.
I think it's one of those things where I kind of lump it into kind of stylistically kind of the same as like Francis Bacon's paintings, and that kind of like just expressive over style. Because first Dave McKean I read was Arkham Asylum, which he did and I picked that up and I was like, oh, comics can be different. More, they can be everything, and that kind of sparked me so when I see your work and kind of looking through, I'm like, you've taken expression and just plastered it into pages.
Thank you.
And that's great, and that's why I want to chat to you.
I'm having a terrible January getting back into it, so thanks. At the moment I'm just taking I can't draw and channeling it in, you know, those when you're out of touch, because I haven't drawn because of COVID, and in holidays I haven't drawn for like 5 weeks, and it is just like every mark you're like wading through mud.
You have to do those kind of what I call reminding yourself you can draw. Is like everyone has one thing they know how to draw, and you just go to yourself, everything I'm doing is terrible, so I'm going to draw this one thing to remind myself I know how to draw.
Yeah, I do self-portraits. Like, I know it's very odd, but I taught life drawing for a long time. So drawing from observation is my go-to, because that's something I'm comfortable with, and I use black carbon typewriter sheet papers, so you're doing it blind. So there's absolutely no expectation about what the result is, because you can't see what you're drawing. So I find that really soothing. And, you know, if I could have a life model on hand, I would, but I don't. So I have a mirror in my studio, which I'm in now, and it's sort of there. Nice. And I just sit and do blind portraits, or I draw my hands over and over again. And that sort of goes, no, I can still draw. It's fine. And now I've just got to go draw that comic, you know.
Just kind of reminding myself, like, all right, now I've got to go back to the hard bit.
Exactly.
For people listening, I mean, we should probably mention what your work is, because we've glanced at just saying your book multiple times.
All right. So I did my debut graphic novel came out in 2020. I launched 2 weeks into the first lockdown, so that timing was superb. Beautiful. And it's called Barking. It's an allegory based on experience I had when I had a breakdown after my dad died, but I combined it with experiences of some of my friends who were institutionalized when they had breakdowns, and then I've added mythology into it, and it's a bit of a kind of horror story and a ghost story. There's all sorts going on, but that's my probably what people most know me for. I make zines as well, so Barking has a set of mental health zines that go with it. My next one's Shelter, that I'm going to get working on is going to be a folk horror set in 1969 London, and that's got a set of zines because it's sort of kind of about being a woman. It's kind of about expectations. It's a lot about mythology and folk horror as well. It's all set in the London Irish community because my dad's from that, and I love kind of Irish mythology. But before I can do Shelter, I'm writing and drawing a Black Hammer short for Jeff Lemire for his Substack, and I think that's going to go out as a new sort of set of like Black Hammer Visions kind of thing with Dark Horse at some point as well. So I'm a bit stressed about that. it's quite a big deal. You know? And Jeff's like just the nicest human. He basically got money from Substack and wanted to use some of it to support creators he likes. So it's me, Lila Sturgis, David Robinson, a couple of Tate Brumble and stuff. So there's a couple of people that he's gone, right, please have some of this money and make me a comic. And you're like, okay, I'd love to, but I'm equally like, oh Jesus, you know, it's a big deal.
I like that you did the thing which I do, which is where you kind of go, okay, I'm doing this thing, but I've got to do this other thing first, and I got to do this other thing first.
Honestly, 2021 was going to be the year I made Shelter, and I'd written it a while back, and I fully finished the script. I'd thumbnailed it. I was good to go, and I'd done all these jobs. Like sort of 2020, when the book came out, I spent a year pretty much drawing other people's comics, and it was great because I wanted to work with writers and get my head around scripts. I wanted to just sort of explore that a bit and widen kind of what I was working on, and it was really great to do. And then I had two that I'd sort of promised. One was a charity thing, and another one was called Yoshin, which is coming out, so it's to raise money for victims of the earthquakes in Japan in 2011. And then the other one was with Jordan Thomas. And I turned Jordan down about 2 or 3 times because I was just too busy and I got a kid and I just couldn't do it. And it was like, no, I promise I will draw you something, I promise you. And he'd written this with me in mind. So that was like, okay, I'm going to do Yoshin, I'm going to do Jordan's story. And then that's it. It's just my stuff. And I had literally finished Yoshin. And I do mentoring as well. I was doing a mentoring session and I got an email come through from Jeff, and I'd done some stuff for him in the past. I'd done a couple of pinups from Black Hammer, and he kindly did the cover quote for Barking. So we've had very little engagement, but we've had some engagement. But he has the private email address, and it was like from his private email address. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And it's just like, Lucy, can you talk now on Zoom, like now? Right. And I had to say to Emma, my mentee, did you ever watch Sweet Tooth on Netflix? And she's like, yeah, I love that. And I was like, okay, so the creator, Jeff Lemire, just emailed me, and I've got to like Zoom now. And can we reschedule? I talk to you in like half an hour or whatever. So we had these mad, like, it was amazing, like chatting to Jeff on Zoom, and he's clearly checking out my studio. He's like, is this your studio? And you're like, oh God, have I tidied up? Like, it was really amazing. But he's just such a cool guy, and just really, like, I think like the same thing with The Leveler. He works really hard at his comics, and he just sees himself as the same as all of us. I think he thinks of himself as still that person, like putting together hand stapled zines at work. So it was wild. And I'm still, I'm really happy with it. He allowed me to write it as well, which was like, because he sort of said, what do you reckon? Do you think you can write it? And I was like, yes, I think so. So, it was kind of, I had to pitch him the idea, and then I don't know how much he's like looked at the script or anything. He's got it all. I just uploaded stuff to Dropbox, and he seems very happy with it all. So we'll just have to see how it goes. I have no idea what Black Hammer fans are going to make of it. I love Black Hammer, but you can only tell. I've done my story, and he said, write it for you, draw it for you, don't sweat the rest, so that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think
stressful.
Oh yes, definitely stressful.
Very stressful.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned kind of like writing for other people, but I think when people do start doing things with other people or collaborating, they tend to bend to what they think their audience will want at that point, rather than just going in and like, no, this is what I want to talk about, so we should talk about that.
And I luckily my idea is very much my kind of thing, and he was totally up for that. He loves barking, so I thought, well, you know, I made barking with it's just, I'm going to make the book I want to make. It's such a like difficult topic, and it's not going to be for everyone, so I'm just going to make what I want to make. And then people have really responded to it, so you go, well, okay, it's pretty great to have my precedents be that I just went, here's the comics rule book, I'm just gonna throw that out the window. You know, because I love comics and I've read them forever, and I really appreciate people who have that art of doing like 9-panel grids and stuff like that. Like there's a number of artists I like Anand, who draws for Ramveen. He did like Blue and Green, and the new one, Apocalypse Radio. Such a talent, and you know, beautiful, tight but loose drawings, very Dave McKean. I can't do that. You know, I'm a messy artist, and I do like I design them by spread, by comics. So it's not even like I'm working from a grid. It's just like, what's happening on that spread? How can I mess with this? How can I ignore the bleeds, go across the center? You know, all the things that the printer hates me for. You know, so yes. Personal apology to Rich from Comic Printing for having to print my stuff.
Say all those things which gets told off by graphic designers and everyone else who looks at
you. God, I can only recommend one thing in comics, and that's have a really good relationship with your printer, who I do, luckily, because I do things that I'm sure annoy the absolute crap out of him. But my files are good and my bleeds are good, so he has to, you know, just accept it.
You have to break the rules every once in a while, I think.
Yeah. I think, well, for me, I was in animation before this. I was like a 2D animator. So I'd studied illustration and animation on BA at Kingston. And I went into animation, but it's still very geared towards things looking cute. You know, there's still, even when there's more adult content, there's still a kind of cuteness to it. And I can't draw cute to save my life. Like, just, even if I try, it looks like it's trying to kill you. You know, it's one of those, I don't know what it is. I just don't.
Weird threatening aura. Whatever's happening.
I always describe it as there's an artist, Nara, who used to paint these little cute girls, and they were literally hiding knives behind their backs, or you know, doing, and that's what my stuff looks like. And it's like with no intention. You know, my daughter will be like, "Mummy, draw me a unicorn," and I'm like, unicorn that could eat your face. You know,
still a unicorn, right?
Still a unicorn, just looks like it's born out of hell. You know, so I sort of left animation because I was trying to kind of fit into something that I just wasn't, and it was so creatively frustrating that it's just like, I can't be doing this anymore. And then that's why with comics it was like, oh, well, just do whatever. Just do whatever. It's comics, right? There isn't actually a rule to what they look like. There is standards and there are precedents, but there's not actually rules. And I think of all the industries and genres, they're one of the ones that are most open to change and someone to do something different, you know, like, so I love comics for that. And I'm really glad that, you know, it was accepted what I was doing. So I was drawing barking, going, people are going to hate this. They're just going to hate it. And I'm sure some people do, right? But luckily enough people don't. So that's good.
I was just thinking, kind of interesting you saying of like comics seem to be at least a medium where you can just kind of, you know, be awkward, be difficult, kind of thing. It's like, you're obviously you're going to get people who are into one specific type of comic who'll be like, no, you need to do this, and this. And you're like, but no, it's every so often you just go, oh, no, I'm just going to make something which I feel like you're going to hate. In the best way. You're going to hate this, and you know, I'm not going to apologize because you don't have to buy it, you don't have to read it, but it is going to exist in the world, I'm afraid. Should never apologize.
I don't know. I gave up apologising, I think, in my 20s, unless I bump into someone, because I'm a Londoner, so I always say sorry.
That's just England. Like,
it is, isn't it? Yeah, I've got lots of New Zealand family, and New Zealand's a fairly polite country, but they just don't do that stuff. It's just like, you know, it is a very English thing.
The one which gets me is when someone bumps into you and you apologise.
Yes.
Like, so you're like, oh, sorry. Like,
yeah, it's
wasn't even my fault.
Yeah. I've done that where I've bumped into a bin and said sorry, on the street, and be like, I don't have to apologise to bins, Lucy. It's not like the bin's going to be, all right, mate, don't worry about it.
I think that's interesting, though, because I think, as you say, it's like, it is a very English thing to be a bit apologetic about what we do in every single part of our lives. So at times we struggle to be interrupting, especially even with artwork and even with creative things. When you think about it, you think, oh yeah, I don't know if someone's going to like this. I don't know if people are going to respond to this, or am I going to have to apologize for it before it even comes out? Because, hedging your bets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely in that mode of thinking at the moment. Like, oh dear, here it comes. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think I have to learn to be less like that in some ways, but then who wants to be that person that's just like, here's my thing, deal with it. I don't care what you think. I don't think I could ever feel those bridges. It's just not really my bag.
No, I think it's it kind of all links together in sense of kind of looking and getting more into zines and kind of zine media. There is a lot of that, because obviously founded like within punk values, which was a lot of like, fuck you, I'm doing whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah.
Whereas you get artists who are so sensitive and so naturally inclusive, just like, I hope you like it and this kind of thing. You have to put on a little bit of ego and step out and go, no, this is this. Whereas I like to do a thing where I don't announce that it's there. I just put it out and put it on a table and go, yep, it's there. I'm not apologizing for it, but I'm not forcing it on you.
In no way. Yeah, it becomes, especially with the bigger cons, you get with Thought Bubble, there was a lot of kind of like people not wanting to catch eyes with you in case they had to come to your table and look at your books. And you're like, do I look away first because they've caught eyes, they look awkward? Do I look away first so they don't have to? And I was just got to the point where it's just like, have a good day, enjoy yourself, don't worry about it.
How are you? It's a mix between kind of hear me roar and sit meekly and
yeah, exactly. Well, I got a big roller banner for that, so I just thought, well, the roller banner's there. If they're interested, they can see the kind of work and they can come over, and if not, they can just keep walking. So yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Although I guess that's what social media is for. I do a post and run, be like, hey, my book's out, and then just run off the site for about 2 hours and then check in and go, does anyone care? That person cares, right? Oh,
see if there's questions.
It's I mean, I've deleted Twitter and Facebook apps recently and forcing myself to like only go on the browser, because I crowdfunded Barking, and that was basically like nearly 2 years of just constantly working it on social media, which left this horrible kind of addiction to the habit of social media, and it's been really hard to kind of get out of my life and kind of step back a bit and be like, I don't need to be working this 24/7. This is that addictive personality thing again. Gave up smoking, I found Twitter.
Twitter is the new smoking.
It's just bad for you. So but I've got I'm probably about 80% of my work through Twitter, so it's not like I can't not do it. And there are definite good sides to it, but equally, I just don't need to see the world raging at each other at 8 a.m. It's just a bit much.
Yeah, I think social media and Twitter and whatnot, I think, is always interesting seeing it from other people's points of view. I mean, obviously, being myself and being just a random man on the internet and being a random man on the street, I know that I have one view of the world. And then obviously for women and other people who aren't white, I'm just like, it's interesting to see what you get, like just to see what you get back when you post things.
Oh my God, I know, right? And that side of it is just, it is a real kind of social experiment, and you do see, and it's nice to be able to kind of back someone up when they've been completely destroyed for just having an opinion, and that equally it's awful that you go into it knowing that it's like, I know if I post this, I'm opening myself up to those potential opinions. And I got involved in a couple of kind of rows inadvertently, and it was just like I got tagged into something that I wasn't even a part of, and I woke up and someone had tagged me into this row, and it was my daughter's birthday, and it was like I'm driving to a bloody theme park with my kid whilst this row's erupting, and it was just like, wow. And made me go, oh, I forgot you can mute accounts. So just mute, unfollow, mute.
I can just remove you from it.
Yeah, you know. And it was, I definitely, like, I loved Twitter at the start because I just knew comics people, and I kept it to that, and I kept it small. And then because there's crowdfunding, it was sort of lots of kind of follow back stuff, and it gets bigger. Now I barely see the people that I went on there to see because my accounts have got too high, and I'm just going to have to like literally mute loads of people in order to see the people I want to see, you know. And it's really hard. You kind of like, I almost want to set up another account and go back to just having 12 followers, and I only follow the people I want to hear.
A sneaky shadow account where you just like, it's me, but it's don't tell anybody it's me.
Not Lucy, definitely not Lucy.
Definitely.
It's a shame though, because there's some really good stuff to it, but I haven't got the headspace. But I'm listening to an audiobook by Johann Hari, is an investigative journalist. He did a really great book on mental health, on depression and anxiety, called Lost Connections, that I listened to, and it was about sort of like the things you can do. He sort of went around the world finding places where they deal with mental health in ways that don't involve medications. So it would just be like, you know, community gardens and all sorts of, because it basically comes down to the fact that there are certain aspects in your life that lead to you feeling like that as well. And these are the things small changes you could make, or things you could do to just sort of improve the quality of life. And maybe that will just be enough to kind of get you out of it. Really interesting book. And now he's doing one called Lost Focus.
Okay.
And it's all a stolen focus, and it's all about how social media and the speed of everything is sort of, and the phones, you know, being able to get a work email at Sunday midnight, you know, how that's sort of just destroying our focus and our ability to kind of maintain long-term interaction with something like a book or a graphic novel in a solid kind of reading session, and how it's so beneficial to you in terms of just mental health, but also for empathy and all these things. So it's really interesting. And I was about, I don't know, an hour into the book, and I'd like deleting apps. Got onto the social media bit, and it's like, bye Facebook, which I don't like Facebook anyway, but it's a sort of necessary evil for many people, you know. It's how I keep up with all my family and friends in New Zealand and Australia and stuff. So it's been very interesting, and and I'm reading comics, so every time I feel like I go, I'm checking on Twitter, I go and pick up a comic and read that instead. And it's been much more beneficial.
Just switching to another addiction.
Yeah,
where you're now
exactly.
singlets,
but at least it's a good one, and I don't have to buy anymore, because I've got around me about 3 reading piles I can see, and even some on my bookshelf that I still haven't managed to read yet. So it's there. It's ready. But it has to be one addiction to the next, I think.
I definitely think kind of like the online thing, it's when you mentioned there, just like the erosion of kind of empathy, which you see online, and seeing, it's weird seeing that translate into kind of real life situations. I've found. It's like kind of like going to events and whatnot. And I think I had a chat at the start of the year with a couple of friends who work in hospitality, and they were saying, kind of coming out of lockdown, people were just ruder. There was like a weird fatigue that people just kind of got so fed up that they were just now all airs are off. We're
and so used to, because everything went very online, and then I think everyone got used to talking to each other in that manner, and it's not okay. You know. God, I grew up in hospitality. I grew up in a pub, and I worked bars up until I was in my late 20s. And I just felt, so, as an industry, it was like, I just felt for them so much, because it is like, you're going to be dealing with people who are done, and that is not, and then they're going to get drunk, and that's going to be really unpleasant, you know. And yeah, I wouldn't do it again for anything, you know. It's just, it's fun when you're younger, but it wears.
Yeah, it definitely wears you down as you kind of go through. But yeah, it's kind of a strange one. I think we're learning it more and more. Like, it seems weird because social media has been around for what, the last decade, 15 years as a thing, but we're only just kind of getting to a point of like, there needs to be a segregation between
and
who
what
you
does
are
it
online,
mean?
what toolkit you use as yourself as well, because like we were saying with the whole idea of how you promote yourself and how you like the attitude you take when you put out your work, but when you defend yourself online as well, that's a completely different basket of tools,
absolutely.
You can't be timid. You have to step in and be like, no, this is right, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it can be, you know, I've had sleepless nights over that stuff, and it's just like, this is all happening in a virtual arena and I'm not sleeping about it in the real world, and that's just not okay. You know, because I've got a kid, I've got a job, I've got stuff to do, and I can't be up all night worrying about these two people rowing that I've somehow been dragged into, you know. It's something that we're going to have to get our heads around. And also, like, I think the key is not to be a conspiracy theorist, but who benefits from the fact that we're all shouting at each other and arguing, and that stuff really bugs me. You know, I probably watched too many, what's his name? The documentary making, just those amazing documentaries with archive footage and brings them all together. He did like Bitter Lake, and the most recent one was about the kind of Trump era America. Can't believe I've forgotten his name. I might have to Google it. He did the one that I looked at for Barking, which is The Power of Nightmares, and it was a very amazing kind of, so he does a sort of spider web of, you know, his sort of Trump and Ayn Rand or whatever her name is in the States, and their kind of high capitalism. Here's Margaret Thatcher in the UK, you know, here's this thing happening in China, and you're like, oh, okay. And he just sort of, it's totally partisan. It's just, these are the things happening, and this is how it's affecting people on an everyday level. And it's really extraordinary stuff. And I'm going to find his name out now. Adam Curtis. So recommend the Adam Curtis documentaries. But his most recent one was really about that. It's like, you know, whilst we're all busy rowing on the internet, what's happening to democracy? And you're like, interesting, you know. So there's a lot of things to it now that are starting to really bug me. And I'm not slagging it off, because there's so many things about social media that I love, but it's finding, like you said, we're going to have to really get to grips with what the balance is in that, and, you know, how much you take from that into your personal life and how much you leave there, and you know, do you want to be that person? Because like, how does that not come back to haunt some of these people in their real life? I don't know. You know,
I think it's one of the strange things. I know I was reading recently about kind of like teens and the effects that it's not necessarily the effect it's had on their mental health, but the effect it has on their development as people. And because it gives you a platform to be toxic. It's unbalanced, but also it changes how you put ideas out into the world. So when you have something which is a little, or what could be seen as controversial, whether it's positive or negative, how you word it suddenly becomes differently. You kind of put it out, even if it's something positive, and you kind of writing something, you know, for your gender or your race, and you're like, yep, this is my story, and this is kind of doing, you in the back of your head, you're like, right, I know there's going to be at least 10-20% of the people who see this might come for me. And it shields you, and you go, all right, well, I need to rethink that. And then when you get kids with it who are really thinking of their self-worth as their online profile because it's so personal to them, whereas older people who've gone home and gone, no, it's just a tool. We have it as a tool. They've had it from like age 6.
That sort of it worries me a lot, because of my daughter, and you know, I think the tricky part they've got is that they follow their classmates and stuff, right? And then celebrity accounts, and those are two very disparate worlds, you know, and they're really kind of echoing people who are pretending to be something in order to sell stuff or get more notoriety or whatever. And they're echoing that at 11, 12-year-old level.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling. And then also that, you know, I'd sort of had a few issues at school. I was quite a sort of mouthy person. You know, I had an absolute bejesus kicked out of me once by like 3 girls, like 20 people in a circle watching.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was beaten up really badly. Got kind of rescued by a local greengrocer before I was about to get stabbed. It was like really bad.
Yeah.
But then it ended and it was over, and the people that I was friends with who were involved came to my house to say, you know, sorry, you've got to leave the group. And that was it. You know, we just parted ways. Whereas now, that would forever now be all these accounts harassing me online, and that would just bleed into my life constantly. And I just think there's no switch offs, you know. No. It's like, and even as I'm in my 40s and I'm struggling to find the way to cope and switch off from these things, like how you do that as a kid is beyond me. I mean, I must say they do talk about it at schools though. Like my daughter's 7, and part of her computing is like online safety. So they'll watch videos and talk about how people pretend to be other people, and you know. So I think the schools do take it kind of seriously, but you know, most of the teachers are in their 20s, so they're living their lives online as well. And it's a really complicated age. And it's, you know, there is a part of me, it's like, I'm just gonna take my family to New Zealand and go live in some remote bloody place and no phones, just go and hide in a shack somewhere, you know. But you can't, you know, it's the world we're in, and it's just about kind of being canny about it, and like you said, being aware of you could become something online that you're not in real life, and how does that sit? Yeah,
I think it's very much a balance of the concern I've always had is because I wouldn't say I'm trolley. I think as an artist, you have a habit of poking the audience anyway. You kind of go, all right, I'm gonna do something like we said earlier, like, and you're gonna hate it. And when you get online, you kind of sit there and go, okay, well, part of that is there, but if that's all I'm doing online, that's all people will think of me as, and I need to balance that with a certain level of his actual personality, his, you know, drinking coffee or whatever you want to do. I think you almost see people adapt the persona they are online. I don't know if that's bad or good in some ways.
It's hard, isn't it? I'm sort of, when I was first on Twitter, I kind of got into the politics side of it quite early on, and then I did have to step away because it was just, like I said, it's bleeding into my real life. And it's like, I don't want to not have opinions, but it just doesn't feel like a safe space to have any kind of discussion anymore. It's very like, you think this or you think that, and if you think that, you're a monster, and if you think that, you're a monster, and you know, well, everyone's a monster, you know. And I think I'm still sort of, when there's kind of big movements like the Black Lives Matter and stuff, which is brilliant, you know, for that. I think it's great that there can be a wider forum and you can bring people into the issue and get them to understand a lot more about it. Same with like some of the violence against women that's been going on. You know, I'm sort of try to just get involved in the things that I feel like deserve you to stand and say, like, well, this is, you know, this is very much where my flags planted, kind of thing. But equally, you know, I'd really rather like be sat around a table having that discussion and having a chat over a coffee or a beer or something. And you know, like my friends I went out with the other night, one of them is not pro, but kind of keeping an eye on cryptocurrency, and then the other of us were like, no, I'm just not into it. And we had quite a heated discussion, but it was a discussion, and it wasn't, you know, we're still friends. It didn't affect us from being friends. And I think if that was done on Twitter, we'd suddenly like be unfollowing each other and stuff. And we could just, she was just like, yeah, it's not working, but you know, potentially, and I'm just keeping an eye on it. And you're like, fine, you know, this is why I think it's not the future. But you're allowed to do that. And she brought in some really interesting stuff about how it happens, like in certain parts of the world where you can't get paid through the banks because they're controlled by the government, but you can get paid through cryptocurrency. And you're like, I get the kind of idea that it's sort of breaking the system, but it's breaking the system in a way that I can't handle, right? So it was nice to be able to have a really kind of heated exchange, because I don't know if you know about the Kickstarter thing where they've announced.
I saw something along it. I hadn't delved fully into it because I hadn't used it.
So they're moving to blockchain technology, and everyone that sort of relies on Kickstarter had to do like a sudden deep dive into what the hell blockchain means.
Right.
And for me, I came up from that going, it's not for me. Right. It's just power usage. There's a point where if they are built from the ground up in an environmentally friendly way, it's fine. But currently, like the one that Kickstarter are using, Cello, it's offsetting its carbon. So basically, it's doing nothing. It's just putting the problem onto someone else's shoulders. So for me, that's it. I can't use Kickstarter now. I won't support it. And I'm not going to be able to support friends who use it, because it's like, for me, it has to be a blanket thing unless they're going to change their mind. It has to be like they've made that announcement. So I've supported my last comic on there and I'm done. But I was going to launch my next comic on there. So now I'm like, right, that really affects me. And I've got plans for Barking, and that's linked into that. And it's like, I'm going to have a really awkward discussion with people about this at some stage. And so I'm really kind of like got the hump. So it was very personal to me when someone's like, cryptocurrency and blockchain. And I'm like, and I have a kid, climate crisis just terrifies me. And I'm really worried about it. I've sold my car, we're sort of moving to more vegetarian eating. And my daughter is a huge meat eater. So it's a big challenge. But, I'm terrified. So the idea of a big company like them moving to something that's hugely power hungry is scary. So I'm out. But it was so nice to be able to have that conversation and to feel so personal about it. And she felt so personal about it. And we were both quite heated. And at points it was like, you think I'm saying this? And it's like, no, but you've been on Twitter and you think that's what other people on this side of the fence think about it. And it's not that. It's, but you're aware that you're having a kind of real life discussion, but you're always negotiating it around the terms of a Twitter row.
Yes.
And it's like, no, we're here in person and we're friends. And, I'm not going to disbar you from my life from having an opinion that differs from mine. I can handle that, But it was really interesting to see how much that does bleed into your life and how you can communicate and how polarized we are on everything, so it's challenging.
It's definitely one of those things of it's removed nuance from a lot of conversation, and I think that's why kind of like I set the podcast up in the way that I do is I like an hour to chat around kind of the topic,
whatever.
Whether we agree or not, it doesn't really matter, because we're going to have an actual discussion about it. And like you said,
exactly,
you're saying like it got quite heated, and I remember when I think it was the Justice League film came out, and there's a scene in that where Batman punches Harley Quinn in the face, and I remember someone had put something on Facebook which was along the lines of you should never hit a woman. And this was advocating violence against women because it was in this film and all this. And you like looked at the comments and you're like, it's brutal. Like the conversation that's happening in this comic. And I'm like, you two are good friends. And the likelihood is what you're actually saying is you agree with each other in the balance of, because one was saying, you have to defend yourself and there's criminal and violence and you have to have some level of autonomy of a situation and context. And the other one was like, no, there's never really reason. But it was all very black and white. If you'd had the same conversation in person, it wouldn't have got to this level.
Not that way.
Swinging and
I haven't seen that film. I've got to say that makes me less inclined to see it.
It's a weird scene. I mean, I'm not a fan of the film anyway. But it's a weird scene in the sense of they've crashed a car and Joker and Harley Quinn are trying to escape Batman, and she like goes to stab him or something, and he punches her in the face. So it's a fight between two people, and you're like, but there is a lot of lot of outside things which could happen here, and because obviously you start to just think, well, what could he have done in this situation?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
I mean, I own one Batman comic, and that's Arkham Asylum because of Dave McKean, and I was given it. Weirdly. And I saw the Nolan films, and I thought they were pretty good. And we watched Joker actually over Christmas because it took me ages to get to it. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's not a superhero film in any way, shape, or form. But it's a really interesting study in sort of how society and can be brutal, and how, you know, we create our own monsters essentially, you know. And I think it's a really interesting film that probably has absolutely nothing to do with Batman. But I don't really give a monkeys because I'm not a super fan of that anyway. Yeah. The idea of some rich bloke going around being the answer to everyone's problems in his souped up cars is just like, no, I'm all right, thanks. You know? I prefer the baddies, to be honest. So but I mean, that's the kind of, it's the level of fandom that I'm trying to just not engage with. And it was the thing when Jeff asked me to do that. It's like, oh, you're putting me in that world, and do I want to be in that world? I don't know if I want to be in that world. Because I've seen lots of kind of creators of colour and women and non-binary and trans creators that had just horrific abuse online for just being asked to do the job, right? It's done nothing other than they got hired, and these people are jealous of the fact that they got hired and don't think they should be able to do that. And it's just like, oh God, I really don't need those people on my case when you know, I was invited to do a thing, you know. I think, but you can't let them stop you, can you? So,
no. Well, that I was going to say is like, that's what kind of concerns me, I guess, in a way, is like, obviously, like you're saying, like when you get offered something quite high profile and it's in an environment which you would usually avoid, you're like, okay, well, do I want to do it because, you know, being a woman, you know you're going to open yourself up to criticism, especially being a vocal, or kind of, as we mentioned in the email, was like the idea of a difficult woman.
So it's like the number one part of my storytelling is difficult women, which is not their bag. You know, it's not what they want.
It makes you second guess yourself, whereas usually you just be like, no, I'm just going to put this out. You're going to hate it, but I'm going to put this out.
And it's not like, you know, I'm lucky with Jeff, who's very clear that he doesn't support that thinking, and you know, he's even like Substack's got this kind of really dodgy kind of partisan line it treads with, well, we allow everyone on here, and they've been accused of giving money to some really dodgy people, and some they haven't and some they have, but they give money to both sides of the argument, so they're really, you know, poking the hornet's nest stuff, you know. But Jeff, you know, he knew that. And so he gave a portion of the money he got to a trans charity, because there's like some really dodgy stuff about trans stuff on there. And he was already planning to have Lila Sturgis on, who's a trans woman, as one of the creators. Plus, you know, I think I don't know this creator, but from my understanding, they're Indigenous Canadian creator as well. So, you know, just proper right on, you know. Decent human, and I've seen him on Twitter when a point needs to be made to say, I don't support these people or their opinions. So I know he'd have my back, and I know he doesn't counter it either. He's just like, just ignore it, don't worry about it, you know. You know, it's just, and it's true, you sort of give these people worth and then they have it. But if you decide that it doesn't actually matter and they can go sit at home spitting bile at their own screens, then you've just got to kind of live with that, I suppose, and try to ignore it. But hence the deleting of apps. Not only was it distracting me from my work, but it was also like, I'm just going to get used to this before there's any engagement. I mean, I don't feel like I've done anything particularly outrageous with this script, but you know, it's very much on the difficult women line, and that's going to be there's no male characters, like not a one. So you know.
I guess I'm kind of curious in that sense of, because obviously you're kind of thinking it in terms of how people react to it. Does part of you kind of sit there and go, maybe I should make this more volatile than I usually do.
Yeah, no, funny enough, I'm lucky that at least, because I hadn't written for a while, and I did barking. I mean, I had to like send Jeff a kind of caveat email of like, I don't write comic scripts like comic scripts. I don't do panel one. Yeah. You know, I write film scripts essentially. So I do action and dialogue, and then I start breaking that down into page spreads. So I know that this thing's happening, and I make sure that I've got an idea of how many drawings. Well, actually, I'll start thumbnailing it then and start changing it to make sure that it can work and I can physically draw that many things on a page and stuff. But I was lucky that this idea just sort of formed. It just came out really smoothly, and I had this with Shelter, my other comic, as well. And they just, I don't know, they must have been sitting there somewhere, and they just kind of went. I was like, oh, okay. And I sort of molded it, and it wasn't until it's finished I went, there are some people that are gonna hate this. And it's not even like this is building it up like it's going to be this really outrageous thing. It's not. It's just I've sort of fitted another universe into a universe that I want it to be in, and I've just done that. You know, I've sort of taken a thing and put it somewhere else, and that alone can be enough to wind people up. You know, but you know, I looked over a load of, I read Black Hammer, but I haven't read all of it. And I started looking, I got the Black Hammer Visions book and started looking through that. And that's where they've just, Jeff and Dean have just invited people to do their own versions of the characters. And it's on those lines. So it was just like, they're pretty wild. There's a beautiful kind of Barbarian one where it's all watercolor and it's done like a film noir. And you're like, okay, you know, like, that's in the rules, then you know, if they can go film noir with Barbarian, then I can do what I'm gonna do. So it's that's interesting. But I think I've got my partner is an animator, and he teaches animation, and he writes film scripts, and he's very good. We talk a lot about our work, and we talk a lot about, we watch films together and whatnot and read books. And he was always the one that's really good at saying, you know, you never ever create for your audience ever, you know, because you can never pre-guess it. Yeah. You're never going to get that right, for one thing, because you don't actually ever know who your audience is. No. Yeah. You know, when I made Barking, because it's like sort of semi-autobiographical and it's about mental health, I thought my audience would be primarily women, primarily probably people who had mental health problems. And it turns out I have like a really high male readership, you know, and then I find that really, it took me completely by surprise. I wasn't expecting it to appeal to so many male comics readers, you know, just didn't think it was going to be their bag at all. But it has been, you know, and it's really like, okay, so, you know, I made this thing with an idea of my audience, and they're absolutely not the people I thought they would be, you know, and that's amazing. And it's so great, but I made the book I wanted to make no matter what. So in the end of the day, then it found the audience for it, you know, rather than me going, hey, this is for you people. You in the back, I'm making this for you, you know. It's just, these are the stories I've got to tell. And I think even my fantasy ones are kind of still based on kind of personal experience or something about something. I think I can only write with something that has a level of lived experience to it. Yeah. So, you know, that's going to appeal to certain people and it's not to others. And I'd be surprised if the people I'm worried about even look at it. You know. So
I find that interesting, kind of saying that you obviously you have quite a high male audience, because when you mentioned of discussing kind of like around the idea of difficult women and topic, it reminded me of, so one of the main artists I studied when I went through kind of college was Paula Rego, and her Spanish paintings of dog women. And we had two female art teachers, and the class was 80% female. And they basically were like, yeah, we're gonna study Paula Rego because it's going to appeal to most of the class. And most of the class weren't fussed about it. And me and the one other guy were like, these are fantastic. So this is speaking to me a lot. It's like, you guys don't get this?
It's interesting. I had someone say to me recently, an editor, that they thought it was because I drew in a male way. which I found very interesting. And I don't consider any of that, you know, when I'm drawing it, but it was interesting to have, because I always get compared to male artists. I've never been compared to a female artist, and then I go, well, I guess I don't know any female artists I think I draw like either. So that makes sense. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how that stuff ends up getting so gendered, but
I'm not.
It does.
I remember someone walked into my house once and said, it's like, you have a very male home. You're interested in very male things, because I'd taken some photographs of some car parks which were empty, and I was like, they're just great liminal spaces. I really no, that's a really male thing. I'm like, how
definitely isn't. I do stuff like that all the time, you know, and it's the liminal, isn't it? It's that idea that you're sort of at a boundary somewhere, you know, and it's, especially if it's in the ordinary, you know. I like that kind of ordinary meets extraordinary. I would have a photo of car parks on my wall. We've got many things like that, you know. My partner's forever taking crazy pictures of like textures and drain pipes and stuff, and I do that stuff too. So
it's more of a mentality, I think. And again, maybe it comes back to that kind of whole black and white thing which we were saying about online. People want a black and white. They want it because it's easier to understand, maybe.
And they can compartmentalize it a bit more. That could be it, isn't it? I like the nuance though. I like ambiguous endings, and you know, I don't want cut and dry stuff where someone just goes, this is how it works, and that's it. You know, like, but what if it doesn't? What if I pull this plug out? Does it still work?
Again, I think it's that artist thing, and you know, it's that mentality of, like as you say, it's a difficult woman to just be like, what if? You know?
Exactly. Well, I think for me as well, it's like in that context, it is a gender thing in a way, because I think the idea of kind of like unreliable or unlikely heroes and stuff, and what are they called, unlikable heroes and unreliable narrators and stuff, they're always male characters. You know, they're always like the dodgy crim, but you kind of like him anyway. But we're just hitting a point where there are female characters like that, or there are non-binary, or there are gay characters like that, and I think it's starting to get kind of interesting that you can shift and go, well, how do you represent it? Like, I'd say like Fleabag represents a difficult woman, you know. She's very funny and amusing, but she's doing some pretty shitty things, you know, and she did a shitty thing, if you haven't seen the whole thing, you know, and it's perfect. There's this perfect example of that, you know. And the same, actually, you know, like, I May Destroy You, you know, Michaela Cole's character is the same thing. She's had a terrible thing happen to her, but she's difficult in the way that she deals with it, and she approaches people and she does stuff where you're like, why are you doing that thing? And I think it's a really kind of fascinating line to tread, because I think women are more expected to be kinder and softer, you know, and it's a bigger thing when we screw up, whereas every woman I know is a screw up on some level, and has done, and you're like, how have we been painted in this way where it's like it's totally against our character to do that, you know? And with Barking, when I had a breakdown, people think about depression as being, I'm going to lock myself in my room and go under my covers, and I can't deal with the outside world. Whereas I was like, no, I'm going to get really drunk, I'm going to pick a fight with that massive guy over there, because that's what you do, right? You know, mine was like full anger mode, and it was terrifying and made it really difficult for people to help me, because I was prickly as hell, and I definitely didn't come across like I wanted help. You know, and you know, in that I became this kind of difficult woman who really needed help but really couldn't get it, because everyone was just like, oh, Lucy is intense, you know. So I like to put that in. I want to explore that more, because, you know, I don't think I'm that person anymore. I'm still not someone to be easily trifled with. I grew up in a pub. I'm still capable of having a bit of a discussion, but I know how to like let that be a discussion now and move on, like we said. But equally, like how age affects that, and you know, I was much skinnier when people found me quite troublesome. How once I put on weight, I'm less threatening somehow, and there's all these kind of really interesting aspects, and I love seeing kind of depictions of it in cinema, and it's not fully in comics yet, and I think I'm hoping to address that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I think you've just given me a thought there of why kind of we respond to characters like you're saying, with the whole idea of kind of like the bad boy and the anti-hero has been very, very male. It's always been very male, and it's always annoyed me because I'm always watching things and thinking, and someone will say to me, you know, oh, this is a very male trait. I'm like, well, no, I know a lot of women who are like this. Like this is a person type. And I know exactly. A lot of people like that.
Exactly.
And it's because those characters are so much more rounded as people. And when I did a Google before I came on of the title Difficult Women, and there was 2 books on it. And I was like, okay, what are these books? And one of them was very along the lines of heroines and people who've struggled and gone through this. And a lot of the reviews were along the lines of the idea of kind of feminism moving on from hero worship. And I thought, it's a very male thing of we went through as well. Like you get heroes and then you get anti-heroes. And obviously the anti-heroes came as a contrast to Superman and all these archetypes. Yeah. And like, it's almost like women are going through it again to get back to it.
And I think this time we did it to ourselves, unfortunately. So that's the crux on that one.
It's just a strange, fascinating thing. I'm like, we respond more to it because we're like, people are human. Like,
and how do you get them? Because like Harley Quinn's like that, right? I guess as a character, I'm not big on that, but what annoys me is like the more difficult the female character, the less clothes they wear.
Yeah, that's weird.
You know, and the bigger their boobs get. You're just like, what if she has tiny boobs and a belly?
The more difficult a man is, the more clothes he wears, because they tend to give him layers.
He's more complex. He's physically layered, mentally layered.
Guarded.
You know, he's a deep guy. He's going to wear a hat in shadow. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's a really kind of like, interesting. I think there's a lot to kind of explore on that, and I think this is where I feel like there will be a kind of level of it's just going to piss people off. Like I have a point blank refusal to draw large boobs on anything. I'm just not doing it unless we're talking like someone proper voluptuous who should have them, or they've had a baby or something. But I'm not, you know, in that world of that stuff because it's, you know, as someone who has them, they don't work that way. Like, it's just not. It's not possible. I've literally put comics down to go, no, I'm sorry. The boobs are the problem here. That's just not physically possible. Work, that person would just tip over.
It's when you see people and they're super thin. You're like, you don't have insides.
You know,
like, I don't understand.
And are you carrying them in a bra? Is that where you put them?
I don't understand.
Yeah, it's very awkward, isn't it? But I want to sort of go into that a little bit and how you can change the perception of things, I guess, in some ways, but equally I've just got to figure out how to draw the bloody thing first because I'm still in that.
The starting point of all things.
I mean, I did a year of drawing other people's work, and there were times when you're reading it going, wow, that's what I'm drawing. You know, like, okay. I mean, it's stuff that I would never have written for myself. I would have written around it so they didn't have to draw it. So like I did a story with Dan Watters for Razor Blades, and it's like Sweeney Todd. And the opening shot is an aerial view of a bustling Victorian London on the Strand, you know, and you're like, great. Thank goodness for like online photography archives and stuff, so I could actually get some reference, because you can't spill Victorian London out of your head. You need reference for that. And then when I did Index with Fraser, which is like a sci-fi, you know, most of it's like one that's set in a house with a girl running down the stairs at the start, but you're like, stairs, okay, running, okay. And then it was okay, it's all outdoors, and then it gets to a scene in a kind of underground warehouse with lots of people, and then you're like, how do I draw this? And there were guns, and it's like, I don't draw guns. What do I do with guns? How do I feel about guns? What's the moral? I figured I'd just go around it and draw the light from the gun, like the firing, rather than the actual gun, because it's like, I'm not a technical drawer, but I sort of am, and I'm not in the same way. Like I learned on my degree, we did observational drawing. So you go out on location and you've got to draw everything you see, the people, the cars, the buildings, wherever you are. And we went to Spain and did it, and New York, and around London and stuff. And it was an amazing thing to do, and it really stuck with me as a practice. And I do it like for barking, all of the environmental kind of shots. When I do a big kind of like scene setting shot, I went into London and I drew on site. So it really, really works for me. So working from reference really works for me. But when you're getting into the bounds of things where you're like, I have no reference for that. Yeah. I can't go out and take a picture of a warehouse full of people. It's like, it gets very, very complicated. But then the current script, I did find that actually those times when you're like, God, Fraser, damn, how the hell am I going to draw this? Not to mention Jordan, when I see him again. Because that's a script. I did this time have to have that conversation with myself. It's like, I can't believe you wrote this for yourself to draw. Like, what were you thinking? Are you mad?
Yeah.
How are you going to draw
that? It seemed such a good idea at the time.
I know. And this is how this happens. The writer writes it and goes, this is going to be great. And it's like, it will be if you can figure out how to draw that. But I have just myself to blame in this regard. So, many harsh words were had in the mirror with this,
being difficult for yourself now.
You are a difficult woman, Lucy. Why would you do this to you?
Yes. Why would you punish yourself like this?
Yeah. It's become a very philosophical learning curve.
I mean, I think nothing teaches you more about yourself than trying to put something together like a comic.
Making comics, for sure. Yeah. I'd say animation was kind of close to that. But I think comics might be worse in some way. Like more not worse, but more of a trial. I think, I wouldn't go back to animating at this point either. So.
No, I think that's a good point to round this up. I think we've covered. Not to
we've had a good.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Been a good natter.
But I definitely think people should check out your work.
Thank you, and yours actually. So there you go.
Mine's just there.
You're just going to put it on the table.
That's what I do.
Not say anything.
I'm the worst person for advertising my own work. As much as you get the vocal people online, I'm very much just like, nah. It's just.
Yeah, I hear you.
No, it's been lovely to catch up with you and pick your brains about a few things.
Yeah, ditto. And hopefully I'll get to see you in the real at some point at something.
Hopefully, potentially. If I've not relocated or moved by that point.
Yeah,
The world has become chaos. So now I just like, next week I don't know where I am.
There are no plans. I know, right? There's just plans are out the window.
Definitely. But no, it's been lovely to catch up with you.
Thanks, Graham.
We'll talk to these guys later.